Hello everybody, how are you all doing? I am back. It's a little bit cooler today, which is good because I'm officially more hair than face at the moment. It's like hot anyway, but especially when you've got like all this, it's like wearing the pelt of a woolly mammoth during a heat wave. It's not nice. I'll probably get a haircut at some point. So here we are. We are still in execution. Alex has been held in a military facility while they experiment on him, trying to work out why he is the kind of creature he is. And they ended up killing him, basically. Colonel Panettiere, who is in charge here, she basically tried to kill him. But as he was dying, and really, really dying, Alfred Furness sent somebody to rescue him, and he sent a few berserkers in, and the whole military compound is now under attack by berserkers and black suits and other creatures. And they brought Alex back with a defibrillator and fed him some nectar, and now they are basically breaking out of this military facility. Deja vu, where they're all for one and let's get the hell out of him. And Alex said he's not leaving, obviously, without Z. He's met up with Simon. He's not leaving without Z, and he's just got to where Z is being held. And sadly, Z has just been taken by Colonel Alice Panettiere. Why is she so interested in Z? Well, I think partly because he is immune to the nectar. So now Alex is like, he's a bit sad. We are in the middle of a great big battle in the military compound. Soldiers dying everywhere, berserkers howling, fire, the whole building's on fire. And we join Alex and the others for a chapter called Face Off. I hope that's not literal. We headed back the way we'd come, hoping we'd think of a plan as we went. I was expecting the black suit to try to get me to leave without Z, to abandon him so we could make our break. But to my surprise, he was the one firing off ideas. My guess, he said as we left the secure unit, jogging down the corridor beyond, is that all military personnel will be evacuating. How? I asked, trying to ignore the throb that slid around the outside of my brain as we turned a corner. On foot. Too dangerous, he said. There are too many of us in the city. Most of the soldiers will be going by truck, but the people in charge will escape by air, I'm sure of it. Helicopters, I said, remembering the ones I'd seen circling the hospital and praying that we weren't too late. There must be a landing pad here. Yeah, said the suit. There is, out back by the parking lot. I saw it when they brought me in. I'm betting that if they've got Z, they're taking him with them. Why Z? Simon asked, his shoulder brushing the wall as he glanced nervously at the berserker behind us. The black suit shrugged, slowing down as we reached a large double fire door. I realised that we were heading back towards the main hospital building. Because he's immune to the nectar, I said, the truth suddenly dawning on me. He's immune, said the black suit. Then he's not worth risking your life for. Sooner or later, he'll be eradicated. There's no place for people like him in the new world. I finished for him. Yeah, I've heard it all before. Now shut up and keep moving. I could feel the rage building inside the black suit, the heat radiating from him, but he held his tongue. He shook his head, then turned away. I snuck a look back at Simon to see that his jaw was almost on the floor. He mouthed something at me. WTF. And I felt another twitch of a smile appear on my face. The black suit led the way through the doors, the maze of passageways continuing ahead of us. I could hear the roar of the fires close by, and past that, somebody shouting. We were as silent as we could be as we hurried along the corridor, turning right at the junction at the end. It was lighter here, one half of the hallway made up of windows. I glanced through, and at first I assumed there was a meadow out there, grass rippling in the breeze. It took me a moment to understand that it was actually a parking lot, packed from end to end with soldiers and army trucks in green camouflage. There was a tank out there as well. And behind them all was a giant Chinook transport helicopter, its two rotors spinning lazily. We all ducked, keeping below the glass, all except for the berserker, that is, which hovered in the shadows waiting for its orders. For a while, none of us said anything. We just listened to the grumble of engines and the endless torrent of yelling from outside. Eventually, the black suit began to climb through one of the windows. "Wait here," he said. "I'll take a look outside." "So," said Simon, when we were all alone, "what now?" I didn't answer. "Because the way I see it," Simon went on, "we're actually going to fight the soldiers that were meant to save us. Right? We're now on the same side as a black suit and a berserker, on the same side as Furnace." "We're not on his side," I spat back. "We just want Z." "That's just messed up," he said, banging his head against the wall. "We should be killing these freaks." He gestured to the berserker by our side, "not the ones out there. The soldiers. They're the good guys, Alex. They're the ones trying to save the world." "But they're not," I replied, remembering what Z had told me. "At least their generals aren't. They're going to use the nectar. They're going to make berserkers of their own. You saw what Panettiere was doing. She'd sacrifice the whole world if it meant unlocking the secrets of the nectar." I could see that, Simon, in her eyes. She was as crazy as the warden. "Are you absolutely sure about that?" he asked. "You ever think that maybe Z's safer with them than with us?" But I could see he already knew the answer. They'd take Z to pieces, limb by limb, cell by cell, killing him slowly to find out why the nectar had no effect on him. It would be worse than death, worse than torture. "And you ever think that maybe this is the only chance that someone will find a cure?" Simon said. "A way to make us all normal again?" This I didn't have an answer for. What if Simon was right? What if Z was the key to discovering some kind of antidote to the nectar? What if killing Z meant curing every other kid in the world? Would I seriously sacrifice the future of humankind just to save one kid? A kid I hadn't even known for that long when it came down to it? Would I trade 1 billion lives for one? The answer was as inevitable as it was illogical. Yes, of course I would. "It's Z," I said. Simon sighed, shaking his head. Then he chanced a tired smile. "Fine. But when we get him out of here, I'm going to kill him myself, okay?" "Okay," I said. I held out my mutated left hand and Simon placed his gently on top of it. I wasn't quite sure why we did it, but the contact felt good and we both seemed reluctant to part. It was only when we heard the hiss of laughter from the black suit as he tumbled in through the window that we let go. "You sissies finished," he growled. "If we're going to do this, we have to do it now." He gestured towards the parking lot. "There are too many out there for us to take on by ourselves. I'll flank them. Get their attention. Pull them off to the side. Alex, you need to try to get the berserkers here, as many as you can. It's the only way you're going to get through this alive." He began to crawl away down the corridor, looking absurd in his hospital gown. He looked back only once, saying, "Just don't let that helicopter take off." Then he was through the door at the far end, heading into the roaring inferno of the main hospital building. I pushed myself up, peering through the glass to see that the number of troops outside had increased. They seemed to be pouring in from every direction, retreating from the chaos inside the hospital. Several of them climbed into the chopper, none of them dragging Z. The bird's blades were still wheeling, but it didn't show any sign of taking off yet. I sat back down, trying to get my thoughts in order. "What did that suit mean?" Simon asked. "Get the berserkers here." I didn't reply. I just closed my eyes and tried to focus. I wasn't sure how many berserkers there were in and around the hospital, whether I could somehow communicate with them all, but I did my best to visualise our location, picturing Furnace's war machines charging this way, converging outside the window, on the rooftops, watching our backs. The beast beside us growled, the floor trembling as it stamped into the corridor. "Alex," Simon said, his voice shaking, "if you're doing this, stop it now." It was too late. I opened my eyes in time to see the berserker throw itself through the glass, an explosion of splinters catching the sun like droplets of water. It roared, the noise reminding me of a tiger. Then it began to run, its folds of flesh tensing until it looked like a boulder of solid stone rolling towards the crowd. The reaction from the soldiers was instantaneous, the remaining windows in the hallway detonating as a hail of bullets tore our way. I crashed to the floor, taking Simon down with me, ricochets burning through the air, molten shells dropping all around us. It was like being in the middle of a tornado, the noise deafening, the world turned upside down. I pressed my face against the tiles so hard it hurt, waiting for the branding iron pain of a bullet in my flesh. It didn't come. The storm died out, the thunder of gunshots still audible but directed elsewhere as the berserker moved. I held my breath, my heart thumping too hard as I looked up past the ravaged brickwork, saw the creature in the middle of the troops. It was pockmarked with bullet holes, but it showed no sign of slowing down as it went to work. "Tell me you didn't make it do that," Simon asked, his face next to mine, staring wide-eyed at the carnage. There was a gargled howl, a blur of pink and black dropping from a window above us and running to join its twin. I recognised the other berserker, the one I'd last seen fighting the troops back in the main hospital building, throwing itself onto a pack of soldiers with a noise that couldn't have been anything else except childish laughter. "What choice have we got?" I snapped back. "The only way to end this is to find Alfred Furness and kill him. If the army won't help us do that, then we have to do it by ourselves. If they won't help us, then they're the enemy too. The hell with them." I felt the nectar inside me taking control. I don't know how much of it there was. I'd been drained and refilled more times than I could count, but there was enough to finish this. It didn't have to end in bloodshed, though. I sent out another clarion call, a silent war cry to Furness's berserkers, one that would hopefully lead them here. Then the nectar drove me to my feet, making me step out of the window onto the flower bed beyond. "Alex!" Simon yelled at me. "Are you crazy? Get back in here!" I was crazy. There was no doubt about that. But when you've been through everything I have, then you've got a pretty good excuse. With the berserkers still carving a swathe through their ranks, the soldiers had been too busy to notice me. I walked towards them, my pace casual, the nectar keeping the fear at bay. When I was close enough to smell the blood, I stopped, lifted my hands in the air, drew in the biggest breath I could, then unleashed a single word that was loud enough to carry it across the battlefield. "Enough!" I commanded the berserkers to stop, and they obeyed. Of course they did. I was their general, after all. One threw the corpse of a soldier to the ground, shaking the blood from its massive fingers. The other leaped onto the roof of a truck, snorting like a gorilla. Startled, the soldiers continued shooting, some at the berserkers, some at me. I heard a bullet snap past my ear, humming like a bee's wings and leaving a scar of heat on the air. Another one kicked up a chunk of concrete by my feet, showering me in dust. "I said enough!" I yelled, anger making my voice reverberate over the parking lot, the echoes seeming to take an age to die out. "Hold your fire, and we'll spare your lives. I only want to talk to Panettiere." The uniformed men and women scuttled back, using the time to regroup around the helicopter. There were maybe 30 of them left, most reloading, others barking out orders, a few dragging the bodies of their dead away from the stationary berserkers. I stood my ground and held my arms wide, trying to show them I wasn't a threat, trying not to give them an excuse to start firing again. "Panettiere!" I shouted, directing the words at the open door of the chopper. The rotors were spinning faster, the whine of the engine growing louder. "I know you're in there." No response, although I saw several of the soldiers turn their heads towards the door, waiting for something. It was all the confirmation I needed. "Colonel Panettiere, I'm not going to ask again." She stepped into view, dressed in surgical whites and dwarfed by the enormous helicopter. In her hands she held a radio handset, and when she spoke her voice was blasted out through the chopper's loudspeaker. I was close enough to see that same smile on her face, a half-moon of teeth as white as her overalls. "Alex," she said, the speakers crackling. "What a surprise." "What have you done with Z?" I asked. The sound of the rotors was still increasing, and I wondered whether she'd heard me. I started to ask again, but she cut me off. "He's here," she said. "Safe. With us." "I won't let you take him." I took a step forward, 30 machine guns swinging my way, bristling. Impossibly, Panettiere's smile seemed to grow even wider, like there were hooks in the sides of her mouth. "He wants to come with us, Alex. He's not like you. He wants this all to end. He's going to help us win this war." I saw her click off the handset and shout something into the helicopter cabin before putting it back to her mouth. "I'm sorry to learn that you're working for the other side. I'd hoped you would have seen the light, realised where the greater good lay. I sensed a presence, and I didn't need to look to know that there was a berserker on the roof above me. There was another approaching from the side of the building, its presence similar to the way you sometimes just know you're being watched. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. I'm not working for them, I said. I told you the truth, that I'm going to end this. We're on the same side. No, Alex, Panettiere replied, her voice laced with static. We're not. I don't know what you really believe. What you're telling yourself is going on. But look at this from my point of view. You are a convicted murderer. You started the prison break. You unleashed the monsters onto the streets. I thought you were a victim, but here you are, a monster yourself, these freaks at your beck and call. No, I don't know what you are, but you're sure not one of us. She was still wearing that patronising smile, and it infuriated me. I focused on the berserker on the ground, imagined it grabbing hold of a soldier. My control over them must have been growing, because without a pause, the beast bounded forward, snatching a victim from the crowd, holding him up by his neck. The others changed their target, but they didn't fire. They couldn't get a clean shot without hitting their own man too. I'll make a trade, I shouted. His life for Z's. Hand him over and I'll let this soldier go. Then we'll just walk out of here. We can forget this whole thing. The soldier struggled like a hanged man, batting pathetically against the berserker's grip, and a sudden pang of guilt cut through the storm of the nectar. What the hell was I doing? The creature looked back at me, obviously confused, and I forced myself to focus. I wasn't going to kill him. I just wanted Z back. I was doing this for the right reasons. Right? Panettiere looked at the soldier, and for once her smile wavered. She put the handset to her mouth. Alex, you don't seem to have grasped what's going on here. That man, that soldier, he's willing to die for his country, for his planet, for his way of life. He will sacrifice himself because it's the right thing to do. He understands that. All these brave men and women do. Even Z understands it. The only person who doesn't is you, and that's how I know you're not on the same side. I'm warning you, I said, almost screaming now. Give me Z, or this man dies. A wave of anger surged up from my gut, so powerful my vision shaded over, like a dark cloud had passed across the sun. The berserkers behind me howled to each other in response to it, like monkeys in the jungle, and Panettiere retreated a couple of steps from the door into the interior of the chopper. Her eyes seemed to gleam in the half-light. If I'd known you were in charge all this time, I'd have left you to die on that tower, she said. It's a shame, but there will be no trade today, Alex, nor any other day. We do not negotiate with terrorists, not now, not ever. The anger took hold, too much of it to control. Before I knew what was happening, I saw the berserker's fists clench, the muscles knotting. The soldier was crushed like an empty beer can, his twitching body dropping to the floor. No, I said, taking a step towards him. I wanted to run over, to fix him, to breathe life back into the man, to undo what the berserker, what I, had done. But it was too late. Panettiere shouted something into the cabin, then she turned back to me. Z is coming with us, she said. The pitch of the helicopter's engines reached a crescendo, and I saw the wheels rise unsteadily from the ground. I started forward, driven by fury, picturing the berserkers attacking, screaming orders at them in my head. The twin freaks responded, but before they had a chance to move, there was a deafening crack, loud enough to send a shockwave of dirt and dust across the parking lot. The truck beneath the berserker vanished in a ball of fire, and the creature exploded with it, its hissing black guts spiralling out like the sparks from a Catherine wheel. I squinted against the heat, scanning the parking lot, seeing the turret of the tank spin lazily around, looking for another target. The gaping barrel, still smoking, settled on me. The Chinook rose over it, banking hard. Panettiere's voice raining down on me from the speakers. There's a special place in hell for people like you, Alex. Enjoy it. and her amplified laughter almost drowned out the thunder of the tank as it fired again. Extreme measures. I'll make this the last one today, but it's exciting. I threw myself to the side instinctively, felt the heat of the football-sized shell as it roared over my head. It must have struck the hospital because it was as if the gates of hell had opened up behind me, engulfing me in fire. My thoughts were in overdrive, thousands of them stampeding through my brain before I hit the ground. The sheer volume of them seemed to have slowed down the world around me, like they'd knocked time off its rails. I imagined the berserker on the roof, leaping onto the helicopter, grabbing the rotors. Sure enough, when I glanced up through the burning air, I could see it in mid-jump, its long, skinny arms flailing. There was another earth-shattering crack as a second shell thudded into the hospital, the explosion making the ground shake. It was so loud that I didn't even hear the machine gun fire that followed, only the whisper of bullets and the erupting concrete letting me know that they were aiming at me. More thoughts, screaming at the berserkers to charge, to attack. I wasn't even thinking about what I was doing anymore. My brain on autopilot, survival mode. It was either them or me, and I wasn't going to die. Not today. Not before finishing what I promised to do. I struggled to my feet. The heat and the noise and the trembling ground making it feel like I was on a gyroscope. But I kept my balance, ordering the berserkers to tear apart anything in their way. Then I was running, bursting from the smoke so fast that none of the soldiers could keep track of me. I cut to the side and hurdled a truck, landing on the hood of a military Hummer, using it like a trampoline to propel me towards the tank. Its turret spun, slowly, clumsily, and by the time it was pointing in my direction, I was way past it, perched on its roof. From here, I had a better idea of what was going on. Another berserker, a beast that looked like a minotaur, its head too big for its body, its skin charred and smouldering, the colour of coal, had appeared from nowhere. It was in the middle of the group of soldiers, and it looked like it was toying with them, the way a cat does with a bird. Its skin sparked with every bullet that struck it, but just like my arm, it was coated in nectar, impenetrable. Most of the military personnel were fleeing now, although some had sunk to their knees, their eyes empty of emotion, as though their brains had just been switched off. The helicopter was in trouble, 30 metres over the ground and spinning out of control. I squinted into the setting sun to see a berserker clinging onto the sides, its fist lashing out at the forward rotor. There was smoke churning from it, the blades whining. Every time it came full circle, I caught sight of the pilots behind the windshield, and I imagined Panettiere there, her terror. The thought made me laugh. An insane chuckle that rose up my throat like bile. I'd completely forgotten that Z was in there too. There was a grunt as the tank started to move forwards, the turret turning sluggishly back and forth in a vain attempt to knock me loose. I raised my right hand, the blade glinting, half sun, half fire. Then I brought it down in the gap between the hatch and the roof. Shoo! It slid in like a knife through butter, and I wrenched it back out with the ear-piercing squeal of sheared steel. The round hatch popped open, revealing two faces inside, blinking up at me. The sight awakened a distant memory of solitary confinement back in the prison, and for a moment I hesitated. The soldiers inside the tank were little more than kids, a few years older than me. They were just following orders, like Panettiere had said. They were fighting to save their world from the freaks that Furnace had unleashed on it. I took my eyes off them, saw the charcoal berserker with a young soldier in its jaws, pumping nectar into its veins, turning him into a rat. I saw the helicopter clip the hospital roof, spiralling into the smoke. Saw the ground littered with corpses, most no longer recognisable as human. This was wrong. This was wrong. There was a snap, like bubble wrap, a bullet striking my blade and ricocheting away. Another one, the round catching me in my stomach. Inside the tank, one of the soldiers was pointing his pistol at me, ready to squeeze off another shot. Another vision flared up against reality. A group of people in an orchard condemning a boy to die. A boy just like me. And just like that kid, I'd been abandoned. And I would have my revenge. Once again, the nectar reacted before I had time to stop it, my hand slicing back into the tank, skewering the man. I hauled him out like he was stuffed with feathers, flicking my arm and sending him soaring gracefully into the air. I didn't look to see where he landed, reaching in with my other hand and grabbing the second soldier by the head. My fingers weren't fully formed yet, not even close, but I managed to pull him free, then threw him to the ground. He scrambled away and I let him go. He wouldn't get far. The troops had been completely routed, a handful of survivors retreating in all directions. I would have ordered the berserkers after them, but I didn't need to. They were in their element, uttering chirruped cries of delight as they bounded between their victims, until not a single one of them was left alive. I jumped down from the tank, my head thumping, each frenzied heartbeat painting a network of black veins over the world. I could feel the emotions on the other side of the nectar, building up like water against a crumbling dam. I shook my head as if I could chase them away. There wasn't time to think about what I was doing, only why. The means didn't matter, only the end of him. I was halfway back towards the hospital when I heard somebody coughing, so hard it sounded like they would puke up a lung. I lifted my hand, preparing for an attack, but the lopsided shape I saw stumbling from the smoke was unmistakably Simon. I ran to him, guiding him away from the inferno. "What happened?" he asked, rubbing a bruise on his forehead. "One minute you jumped out the window, the next I came around in a room somewhere, and the whole hospital was burning down." "Everything's okay," I said, and for some reason I was relieved that he hadn't seen what had happened. It was better that way. We picked up speed, walking around the side of the building, language coming back to me as the roar of the nectar faded. Z's chopper ended up over there somewhere. Looked like it might have gone down pretty hard. "It was a big bird," Simon coughed. "Should be okay, unless those things got to him first." He nodded towards the coal-black berserker. It seemed to have run out of things to kill because it was squatting amongst the dead, licking the blood from its fingers, looking more than ever like some monstrous cat. I panicked, and without meaning to, I pictured the helicopter on the ground, Furness's freaks tearing into it and killing everybody inside. The beast must have seen it as a command because it lifted itself off its haunches, running towards the hospital on all four limbs. "No!" I shouted, making Simon jump. I stopped, screwed my eyes shut, called the berserker back, called them all back. "Don't touch him," I said, showing him Z's face. "Don't you dare touch him." The monster stopped, looking at me, its head cocked. It waited until we were close, then it joined us, loping alongside like a giant pet. The remaining pink twin also jogged over, a dozen holes in its torso and one of its arms missing. It didn't seem to be in pain, though, as it sniffed the other berserker curiously before walking with us. Simon stuck to my side the same way a kid does to their mum when they're walking down a dark alley. So close, I thought we were going to trip each other up. We reached the end of the parking lot, following the path around the side of the hospital, heading towards the main entrance. There were thick plumes of smoke rising from every direction, and I offered a silent prayer that none of them were from the chopper. What if it had crashed badly? What if everyone on board had been killed? If Z was dead, if I'd murdered him, I'd run my blade through my own skull right here and now. Promise or no promise. Halfway along the main building, we met up with the black suit. He too was covered in blood, and it wasn't his own. He was brushing his hands together like he was celebrating a job well done. "Saw it pass overhead," he said when I told him where we were going. He took the lead, sprinting, and we covered the rest of the distance in a second. We heard the chopper before we saw it, the muted bleeps of its alarm like a heart rate monitor, telling us it was still alive. I skidded around the corner so fast that I slipped on the gravel, tumbling. Simon helped me up, and together we ran into the manicured garden where the bird had landed. Smoke gushed from the rotors, which were still trying to turn even though the helicopter lay on its side, its blades broken. But luckily there was no fire. The door was open, now facing the sky, a couple of soldiers perched on either side, helping people out. A third was obviously on sentry duty on the ground, because when he saw us, he lifted his weapon. "Here they come!" he yelled, pointing the rifle this way. By the time my reactions had kicked in, the black suit was already on the move, covering the last 20 metres faster than the soldier could pull the trigger. He sent him flying with a punch, the gun clattering out of reach. I ran past the black suit and leaped onto the upturned body of the helicopter, Simon by my side. The coal-black berserker followed, so heavy that the metal walls of the chopper groaned, bending inwards. I commanded it to stay still, and it obeyed, watching me with its silver dollar eyes. The soldiers had guns, but they knew when they were beaten. They threw their pistols to the ground, holding their hands up, and I could see in their eyes that they realised they were about to die. They were scared, but they were defiant too. "I don't want anyone else to get hurt," I said, holding my own arms out. "This has gone far enough." The men didn't reply. They just glared at me. If looks could kill, I'd be long dead. I pushed past them, peering down through the open door to see people there, staggering back at the sight of my face. I turned to Simon. "I'm going in." "I'm coming with you," he stuttered back. "No way I'm staying out here alone." I nodded. Then I spoke to the soldiers. "If either of you moves, that thing will eat you. Okay?" The berserker grunted on cue, and the men nodded in tandem. I checked to make sure the black suit was still there, keeping watch. Then I jumped down through the open door. It was hard to see through the smoke, my eyes watering as soon as I was inside. I could just about make out the blurred outlines of 10, maybe 15 people clustered at the back of the chopper, a mixture of medical and military uniforms. I waited for the gunfire to start, my bladed hand up to shield my face, but it didn't come. "Alex?" somebody said. "Wait, Z!" came another voice, this one female. Then a tiny shape in army fatigues was running towards me. Z's arms wrapped around my waist, his smile beaming up at me. Another figure stepped out of the group, also wearing camouflage. She took a couple of steps forward, hesitated, then followed Z. It took me a while to recognise the girl, the same one who'd given me the St. Christopher medallion. Her eyes widened when she saw how I'd changed, what I'd become. But she didn't shy away. "Lucy," I said. "Oh, Z, are you both okay?" Another voice answered for them, Panettiere's. She stood in the middle of the group, the smile finally wiped from her face. "You just don't give up, do you?" she spat. There was a clatter from overhead, then a strangled yelp as Simon tumbled into the helicopter. He saw Z, the pair of them hugging briefly, slapping each other on the back. Panettiere waited for them to finish before continuing. "Are you happy now, Alex? Are you happy with the blood of my men and women on your hands? Happy to have brought the world to its knees?" "No," I said. "Not yet. There's something else I've got to take care of before you'll see me smiling." I lifted my right hand, extending it towards Panettiere. She flinched, but she didn't move. There wasn't anywhere for her to go. A flurry of cries and gentle prayers rose up from the people around her, a couple of them collapsing to the ground. But when Panettiere spoke, her voice was strong. "Then you'd better do it. You'd better kill me, because I'll keep coming after you, Alex. We need him. If he's immune to the nectar, then we can find a way to make others immune too. We need him to find a cure." "You need to butcher him, you mean?" Lucy spat back, jabbing her finger towards the colonel as if she wished her hands too were weapons. "You were supposed to be helping us, not killing us." "We went through this," Panettiere replied, the edges of her voice fraying. "You agreed to it, Z. You understood that sometimes sacrifices have to be made, that some people have to die so that others can live." I looked at Z, and he shrugged. "It's pretty hard not to agree to something when there's a gun pointed at you," he said. "I'm all for ending the war, for things to go back to normal. But, I'd rather find a way of doing it that doesn't involve me lying pieces on an operating table, if that's okay." "Amen to that," said Simon, waving the smoke from his face. "Come on, let's get out of here while we still can." "Hang on a sec," I said, starting forward, holding my arm out like a spear, the point at Panettiere's throat. One thrust, that's all it would take. Somebody like Panettiere didn't deserve to survive this. She was a killer, worse than the rest of them. She was a monster, a Warden Cross in the making. In her head, she probably thought she was saving the world. In her heart, she wanted power. She wanted the nectar. I'd have bet my right eye that if she was offered the chance to swap places with Alfred Furness, to be at the head of his army, she'd have accepted without hesitation. She deserved to die. I felt a hand on my arm. "Stop it, Alex. She's not worth it," said Z. His grip was kitten weak, and yet it anchored me like steel, as though his fingers were passing right through the twisted flesh of my new body, wrapped around the old me, the human me. "There's been enough blood spilled today. Come on, let's leave them." I met Panettiere's eyes, just pockets of darkness in the unknit interior of the chopper. "I meant what I said," she hissed. "I won't stop coming after you. You know all about promises, Alex, and that's mine. I won't stop." I glanced at Z, who was shaking his head. Then I looked at Lucy and at Simon. They stared back, and I knew what they saw. A monster, bent and twisted almost beyond recognition, drenched in blood. My hand dropped as I pictured myself through their eyes, a freak, a killer. And suddenly I was so full of shame that I couldn't breathe. It was as if that dam had finally broken, the barrier of nectar crumbling, the emotions sluicing through. I would have cried, I think, if I'd remembered how. Instead, I just stood there, feeling hollowed out. Z must have sensed it, because his grip on my arm tightened, and he pulled me back. He pulled me away. "Let her come after us," he said softly. "Worse people than her have tried." "And it's not worth another death on your conscience," said Lucy. She was right. I felt like one more murder would mean I'd be lost completely, the last broken pieces of me sinking into the nectar, forever gone. "But if she tries to stop us getting out of this hospital, then you have my permission to kill her ass, good and dead," said Simon, looking back at Panettiere. "Does that work for you?" She held her hands out in mock surrender, her smile like a badly painted doll's. Simon climbed out of the chopper first, his hand dropping down to help Z, then Lucy. I paused, staring back at where Panettiere stood. It was insane, wasn't it? Letting her live. Every instinct was telling me to finish her off, not just as payback for what she'd done, but as protection against what she'd promised to do. But I didn't. Even though some part of me knew that decision would come back to haunt me. I left her standing there, draped in shadows, her hatred and her anger an invisible tide that seemed to lower the temperature in the helicopter by a good 10 degrees. I launched myself up, grabbing the lip of the door with my good hand, hanging there for a moment. From the darkness, Panettiere spoke. And I don't know whether it was coincidence or fate that I'd heard those words before, so long ago, in another life. In a stranger's house after my old friend Toby had been shot, as I was being framed for his murder and pushed out on the streets by the black suits. Either way, it turned my blood to ice, the chills chasing me along with the echo as I pulled myself back into the sunlight. "Good luck, Alex. Run as hard as you can. We'll see you real soon." Oh, goosebumps. Okay. Decisions is the next chapter. We should get to that tomorrow. And then a chapter called The City of the Dead. And then after that, I won't tell you the title, but it's one of my favourite chapters, and I will probably cry, just to warn you. Okay, thank you very much for joining me. I would read more, but we are. But A, I'm starting to get sweaty again. I'm not designed for heat. And B, we are taking the kids, because of the holidays technically, I'm taking the kids to a, I don't know, it's like a petting zoo or something. There's kind of rides and animals and baby goats and like those little pygmy goats are just like my favourite things in the world. They're so cute and fluffy, and they've got little heads and those little horns and those little mouths when they eat the biscuits. So I'm going to go and feed some baby goats. So yeah, for all of you who had respect for me as a horror author, I'm sure that just completely vanished when I just went like a baby goat. But never mind. It's a price I'm willing to pay to go and feed the baby goats. Yeah, so have a really lovely day. I hope you have fun whatever you're doing, and I hope you're staying safe and well and happy and healthy. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.